Hey, everybody. It's good to have you with me again today. We've got a very interesting, very thoughtful guy that we're going to talk to today. I'm going to be visiting with my good friend, George Stoimenov. We're going to be talking about his booklet. I want to make sure I get the title right. The Father Wound, Discovering, Addressing, and Overcoming the Hidden Phenomenon That Shapes Every Man's Life. George has 12 years experience as a coach, as a mentor, as an author, as a speaker, and as a podcaster in the field of men's work, men's inner health, and men's well-being. He is the facilitator and developer of life training for men and the founder of Men's Corner, an online library for men which contains a fast-growing archive of knowledge for men created with one objective in mind: men and their ability to live lives of purpose, integrity, and meaning. And I also want to add that I think George is exceptionally knowledgeable, exceptionally talented. He's an excellent writer. And I'm very excited to be talking about his booklet today. I have been following George's work for what, George, 7 or 8 years, maybe more.
Yeah.
I don't even know now. And I just, I just eat up everything that he produces because he does such great work. And I think that he's going to be a voice for men for several decades. So that aside, welcome, George. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk with you today. Is there anything you'd like to add before we get into it?
Well, just to say I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. And what a great introduction. I mean, how do I live up to that? It's all downhill from here.
No, you're already doing it. You got nothing to worry about.
Thank you.
So let's start off by talking a little bit about the father wound, how you define it, how you approach it, what's the concept that we're working here, and also some questions. So the first thing I want to ask you is, like, tell us what you have in mind when you use the term father wound in the title of your booklet.
Well, the original concept of that's behind this little booklet is this was just going to be a chapter of a big book. And I mean, I was so naive. How do you put something as huge as the father wound in a chapter? But I thought one day I'm going to produce this big book for men. And now I'm realizing, no, it's going to be many books. And in fact, this little booklet will probably keep growing. So it was a chapter, then it's, it became a thing in itself, and I'll probably keep developing that.
Right.
But father wounds, I think the question just escaped me, like the meaning of the question. Do you mean, sorry.
What does it mean to you? Like you could,
okay.
Because I know in your booklet you use the definition that I use. And there are other definitions out there. What does it mean to you if someone said, "Hey, I never heard this before"? What are you talking about?
Yes. Now, before I would have said it's like a wound, or something is damaged. But now I would go as far as to say the whole personality of who you currently are has been, I wouldn't even say influenced. I've been misshapen, completely misshapen, completely distorted. Like not just out of whack a little bit, not just few dents here and there. Like everything that you are right now, it's very little of who you actually were born to be. It's just a lot of this is just twisted bits and pieces here and there. So the whole personality is completely bent out of proportion by a man's relationship with his father and everything that goes wrong in between them, whether it's sins of omission or sins of commission, it doesn't matter. Whether it's the father's absence or his harshness, that's the father wound in a nutshell.
Okay, I think that's well put. I think everybody can probably understand and relate to that somehow. And it kind of goes to the second question I was going to ask you, which is the subtitle of your book or your booklet: Discovering, Addressing, and Overcoming the Hidden Phenomenon That Shapes Every Man's Life. And I think you actually started to sort of get into that a little bit, the pervasiveness of this sort of dynamic in your personality, in the way that your belief system, the way you perceive things, the way you perceive your set of choices in given situations, the way that you perceive other people's behavior. Am I on the right kind of course with that in terms of your subtitle?
Absolutely, yeah. I would even go as far as to say the way you walk, the way you carry yourself, the way your shoulders are, the way there's anxiety built in certain parts of your body, the way there's tension here and there. And so everything, yeah. And it's hidden because we just don't know it. You don't see what you don't see. You grow up just having to survive. Even in the best families, there's dysfunction. But because we have to survive, we cover that over with stuff. And then we feel, I'm normal, I'm okay. Well, yeah, that's why it's hidden.
This rang a bell with me because you talk about how it's expressed physically, in your posture, in the way that you move, and all those kind of things, and even I think in your body language as related to other people.
Yeah,
See, I went like that,
yeah.
and I did a gentleman named Robert Bly. I think you know who Robert Bly is.
Oh yeah.
Listeners will. He came to Austin, where I live, back in 1989, and he did a workshop for a day, and it was filmed to be shown on television, and it's still available on the internet. I'll put a link to it down in the description after this is posted. And there was a point, and I attended it, and there was a point there where the guy who was running the show, the filming, a guy named Bill Moyers, he was a famous American journalist at the time. He asked a bunch of us that were waiting out in the auditorium on a break to talk to him about what that father wound was like for us. And I look at that video of myself now, and I am shocked. I'm absolutely shocked at the way I look, the way I'm holding my head, the way my neck is, everything about me physically just looks like it's just a raw, exposed chunk of flesh. I didn't remember, I didn't know that it was that obvious, So I think that, not to take too much of a side trip, but I think that actually is an example of what you're talking about. That we can be showing that wound in really obvious ways, but we don't even know it because we're just
yeah. I mean, I remember those first videos back in 2015. My videos. This is how you found me, and I mean, yeah, I can't say that I'm completely transformed, but I'm totally different. Just looking at those videos, I'm like, wow, there's so much in the eyes of that man that is just a child. And it's not wrong to be a child, but at some point you need to start getting mature. And so with me, it was like you said, that big chunk of meat, literally for me, was that actually because I was weightlifting as well, a lot. Again, nothing wrong with that. But the way I was using it, the way I was just covering that little child inside, it's just a big chunk of meat, vulnerable, raw, exposed. I'm just a boy. I'm trying my best to be a man. It doesn't work. There you go. That's the father one.
That's also well put. So what are some consequences for a man who doesn't choose to look at this part of himself and doesn't choose to address it?
Yeah, well, as we just said, they're all pervasive, but maybe we should just start with the most obvious, because I would say, well, I mean, if you don't address that, you always be a slave to your father. So if your father was a good man, yeah, you always be a slave to your father, whether you're trying subconsciously to run away from him. And you see people, even like politically, with their beliefs, everything they believe is the total opposite of their dad. It's like, I'm rebelling against this man. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. And you think they're attacking the system. They're attacking their dads.
Yes.
There was even this documentary about two guys whose fathers were, huge, big figures in the Nazi regime. And one just didn't hate the Nazism as much as he was projecting his own father hated. The other one, his father loved him. And he was like, well, they did what they did. Things will be well again. And he was like, are you blind? And the other one was full of hatred. And the first guy was like, the difference is in the body, what the father gave them. So once you've been loved, once you receive that masculine love, everything changes. And so, well, the consequences is you forever be a slave to your father. So if you say, well, that's okay, he was a good man, I'm just going to continue in his legacy. Yeah, but what about the negative things? Are you going to repeat those things? Yes. Are you going to repeat those curses? Like to use that loaded generational curses? Are you really saying that he was perfect? Or if you say no, then you have a father wound. You need to deal with it. But if, like most of us would say, actually, my father was far from perfect, and how am I his slave? Well, if you're trying to escape, like we just said, if you're trying subconsciously, not consciously, in most cases, it doesn't happen consciously. No. This is just how I am. I'm more confrontational. Well, your father was passive, or my father was an angry, forceful man, and I just don't like confrontation. Fine, but you see how you're his slave? He directs your life from the grave, even. So I say that this is not a way to live. You can never become your own man unless you face that wound and overcome it.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think those are great examples. And the thing that occurred to me when you said you'll always be a slave to your father is not only are you a slave to what you saw and what he did and what he told you, whether you actually gravitate to that unconsciously, or whether you gravitate to being on the other pole opposed to it. But I think you're also a slave to the things that he wanted in life that he never had, the dreams that he had that just died. so many men, well, it's just part of life. You don't get everything you want, you know.
Yeah.
But I think if you have a father who felt like his dreams were thwarted and he never really even expressed what they are, that permeates down into like your inner world in some fashion. And you might actually hold yourself back or not even let yourself know what you really want, because he never did. He never said it. But how would you know how if you never saw him do it?
Wow, that's actually profound. Thank you for this. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So can you give some examples of a father wound? Even if a man doesn't feel like negative toward his father or doesn't feel like he was deprived in any way, how might that still show up for him as an adult?
In the things he avoids.
Oh, okay.
For example, confrontation with other men. Like, that's my story. And I'm not out of it yet, but my goodness, when I look at 10 years ago, it's, yeah, I mean, very often people who are really shy and they just quiet and they want to please everyone, and you talk to them and you find out that their father was actually pretty harsh, and then you say, okay, well, you still think I haven't got a father wound, and you are avoiding the very things that your father would charge at.
Right.
Or you can just become just like your father and suffer from the same depression, the same quietness, the same anger. So in both extremes, in which again you're gravitating around your father, whether it's to push against him or whether it is the thing that he couldn't do and gave you that inability, or the things that he could do but didn't show you how.
Right.
Both extremes are just, you're deprived, something's missing.
I think like a lot of, I mean, my father was like volatile, among other things, and threatening and hateful toward me. And I promised myself when I was, and he also worked in a job where he was trapped. He worked in a factory. And I promised myself when I was a child, it's like, I'll never be like him. I'll never, ever be like him in any way.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized, kind of, I don't know, in my 40s or 50s, I guess, I was very unhappy with my work. And I was very angry about it. And I realized it's like, oh, this is his thing. This is what I saw from him. And sort of the catch was, there was a part of me that felt like if I was happy in my work, I was being disloyal to him. It was like, as a child, somehow I made this agreement. We're going to talk about agreements a little bit. I made this agreement with him and myself without ever telling him. It's like, I can't be happy with my work if he's not, because that's not fair. And if I'm happy with my work and he never was, I feel like I'm not being loyal to him. It's a weird kind of logic. Even saying it's like, what? But that was part of one of the agreements I made with him, that he never knew about, that I would limit myself. And also I was like, I'll never work in a factory. Well, I worked in corporate factories. I did the white collar version of the blue collar thing that he did. There are a lot of differences, but still walking in, cranking stuff out all day long and walking out. So I think I think you brought up some really good points on that. And one other question along these lines: how do you see the effects of the father wound in a man who has never felt like a man, especially compared to other men that he would see as being normal?
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's my story. But before I try to answer that, just to go back and comment a little bit on what you just said, isn't it amazing? Because so many men can relate on what you said. And they say, well, look at Rick, his father was harsh and he didn't want anything to do with his father, so much so that he said, I'll never be like him. And yet you recognize that. You can say that as much as you want, but there's always going to be that deep part of you, that boy who says, Daddy, if I'm not like him, I'm nobody. Of course I'm like him.
Right.
And I don't mean that in that wrong, toxic way. Well, boys should be like their fathers. No. There is a purer, cleaner, wonderful version of your father that he couldn't be. And there's a purer, cleaner, wonderful version of the little boy that you were. And these two always wanted to bond. They were meant to bond. And so, of course, part of you will always be like your father. But if you follow him only on the outside, say, no, not like that, or just blindly again on the outside, yeah, sure, that's good, you're great, both on the outside without that bonding. So if all the bonding that you had was like that, bonding or lack of bonding, then of course you're going to repeat his sins, even if it's in an inverted way.
Yes.
He struggles with work. You didn't want anything to do with him, and yet you ended up struggling with work. Isn't it interesting? So yeah, I just wanted to make that note, how profound that is. You cannot escape our fathers. We cannot escape them, and nor should we try.
Well, and I would just add to that. I think that was all well observed. I would add to that just from my perspective, because what it's causing me to remember things listening to you. The two things I wanted most in the world when I was a little boy is I wanted my father to like me, and I wanted three things. I wanted him to like me, I wanted him to be happy, and I wanted to be just like him. So even as I was telling myself as a little boy, I'll never be like that, at the same time, the desire I had was to be just like him, because he was my hero.
Yeah.
Even as badly as he treated me, there, as you said, there's that pure desire to have that connection, to have that model, to please him by being him. It's very profound.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. Doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So yeah. And to answer your question about a man who doesn't feel like a man among other men, this was exactly me. It was so bad. It's even in my the most lost years when I was I had muscles and I was working as a bouncer, pretending to be like the other guys. I literally had to take drugs just to fit in, because otherwise I was too inhibited. But I took some cocaine, I drank, and I had a lot of fun, just very superficial fun. But then, even then, I remember, it wasn't that long ago, to be honest, let's say 15 years. We were watching a video on someone's phone, and one of my friends came, a big muscular guy, and he put his elbow on my shoulder just so he can see the video. And I remember I froze. Now, if I had some alcohol, I would have been fine. But I remember just freezing inside. Something's like, oh, there's a man, right, touching my body right next to me. And it's like, and I'm looking at these guys, I'm thinking, they don't feel that. They don't think like that. They just are. Right. They act.
Right.
So huge. I mean, if you've never felt like a man, it's because your father could never teach you how to be a man. And there is a way. And let's just sort of make that note here that this is not who we are. The fact that we don't feel that, it speaks of a lack. There is a lack. And now the world has taken compassion to a very wrong level. Oh, it's fine. This is how you are. No. If I feel that something is wrong in me, trust me, I know better. And something was wrong with me on so many levels. And luckily, I didn't have anyone to give me false compassion. I knew there was more to me, and I knew that no one and nothing would stop me. And so, if there is a lack of masculinity, there is a reason for it. And it doesn't mean you need to stay like that forever. It does not mean that. And I'm claiming that. It's a very way to claim, but it is true, because that's the statement of my life. And that's, if there's one thing I'm willing to argue over, it's literally just this, nothing else. I don't care about politics. I don't care about the state of the world. Really, all these things are passing and they're getting crazier and crazier. But there's one deep truth, is that there is more to us. Yes. And no matter how old you are, you aren't. So there is a way to get that back, but the father wound manifests in that anxiety when people just are. So there's a reason why I couldn't play team sports. I couldn't, catch the ball or something like that, because I knew I'll let them down. And half of me, to be honest, was cowering, busy, like a little boy cowering and busy, calculating, oh, George, they're gonna laugh at you. Any minute now, they're gonna shame you, mock, And the other half was trying to get on with life. So you can't. You need to. And as a boy, you need to, and there's a reason why I didn't learn to swim, because swimming is about letting go, isn't it? As a boy, you need to throw yourself out there. And I used to watch people just kick the ball, and I'm like, he just leapt through the air, doesn't he? Isn't he afraid that he can fall and hurt himself, or that he's going to miss the ball? People would laugh, and I'm thinking, he doesn't even think like that. He just hurls himself through there, and he doesn't care what's going to happen, because part of being a healthy boy is you just want to push those boundaries. You don't care. You just explode through the body. That's important, through the body. And I never did. And I was like, my body suffered for it. So yeah, that anxiety and self-consciousness is just one of the markers, I guess.
That's a good thing for all of us to be aware of and pay attention to, regardless of where we are in life, because it can be very pervasive and very long lasting, and it can be highly situational. So, you might have worked through a lot of it in a lot of different situations, and you wind up in a new situation and the whole pattern is still there. because it hasn't been challenged, it hasn't been revised, it hasn't been rewritten. It's still the pattern that, you know, that like started up when you were 6 or 7 years old. It just hasn't shown up. And I think that's one reason why, you know, trust me, I'm one of them. People get real frustrated with these processes. They're like, hey, I've been doing this for 3 months. You know, how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been doing this for 30 years. How much more of this, you know, stuff do I have to deal with? And it's just, you know, it's just a matter of what you haven't encountered yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think about it, it's like, how long did your childhood last? You know, every day, every moment, all these patterns are building and building and building, and all these responses to different triggers and input and stimuli, they're building and building and building. It's like, how long does it take to unravel that? Well, you'll never unravel all of it, but you can unravel enough of it so that your life gets incrementally better, and the quality of your relationship with yourself gets incrementally better, and nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also sometimes it takes even longer than it should, because men, and I'm the first one, I'm my worst client. We can do the work. Some of us are brave enough to just say, okay, bring it on. I'll take that pain. Let it come up. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to, you know, deal with it. But one thing cannot take away from manhood is that masculinity is training. So in the old cultures, you had initiation, literally. I mean, no matter how much you knew about your father, and let's say, you know, you were part of a, you know, South American tribe, let's say, and you knew about your father, who is a great warrior, and his friends are all, but that knowledge wasn't enough. You still had to be violently pulled out from your mommy's arms, and the knowledge had to be transferred to the body. From here, oh yeah, my father is great, and I'll be like him. No, I'm going to show you who you are. Now you're going to fast, you're going to hunt, you're going to go to war, you're going to whatever, learn how to build a house, build a life, and your body had to suffer. So there's but then you come back a new man. You come back, become a man. So no matter how much inner work we do, we need training. And you what's the word you use? Rewriting those you know, because now the challenge is, okay, you can do the work, you can, you know, be completely transformed, but then you need to face, and life will bring those people to you, those same faces, those same personalities that once wounded you, and now you need to make a different choice. So if you're a timid guy like me, you know, typically just shy away and then be resentful for the rest of my life, you know, at myself mostly. Now you need to speak up, open your mouth. It doesn't matter, you know, you don't know what to say, try. But it feels horrible. I'm 40 years old and I feel like I'm 4. Yeah, that's your training. That's the training you never had.
Right.
That's your father should have dragged you out and said, boy, I'm going to teach you things, and I'm going to introduce you to other men who will teach you things. Trust me, it's going to be very tough, but we love you. We love you. You can never fail at being a man, because we are here for you. So because none of us had that, then now we have to do that work. The rewriting is very important. I just had to stress that.
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot with clients about software versus hardware. You know, there are certain aspects of who you believe you are that are they're hardware. It's like you would have those traits or those tendencies or those attributes, regardless of what kind of environment you were raised in. But a lot of us make the mistake of thinking that software is hardware. We think things we can't change, and we can change those things. But you know, as you often see in the news, you know, when some airline decides they want to replace their flight management system that's been in place for 30 years, well, that took a long time. And it's like, well, it does take a long time, you know. I can't overemphasize the importance of working through things iteratively, of working through things incrementally, and understanding that's the nature of the repatterning process that we're talking about, whether it's father wound or mother wound or, you know, anything else that we can talk about. Patience is just, it was the last thing I wanted to have to rely on with this stuff. But it's absolutely necessary, because this is, for many of us, this is a life's work. And it's not just about addressing a wound or addressing a development or a deficit. It's a developmental process there. As you were just talking about developmental gateways that boys should be led through by their fathers and older men. And we didn't get that. So it's a developmental process. And I think there's a wound aspect of it, and there's the failure to complete developmental phases. aspect of it. And they're kind of one and the same, but they have some different aspects that I think are worth looking at. So I want to ask you about shame, because you included a quote regarding shame resulting from the father wound in your book. So my questions are, how would you describe this shame? How do we know we're feeling it? How does it show up in our lives as adult men?
Well, I think we all have it. I think we all have it because there is something that we haven't lived up to, or we feel, oh, well, I'm not as good as my father, or I'll never be like that. And so that gap between who we want to be and who we think we are is filled with demons. Right. Shame is one of them. Like Robert Bly said, it's not filled with Disney fairies.
Yes, he did say that.
Or something like that. It gets filled with demons, that vacuum. And so I would describe it that now that shame from the father wound, you recognize it. One of the ways you can recognize it, that what's stopping you today from being open and vulnerable with other men? What's stopping you from being a boy with other men? Because what happens is, what we never had in childhood, we can actually, a lot of it, we can get easily in adulthood. Like, for example, I learned to swim 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, I was a big guy, lifting weights and all that, tight. But here I was becoming a boy again. I'm learning now, going back to the football, to kick that ball that my father kicked and I could never join because I wasn't like him, or so I thought. And now I'm playing with that and I'm like, wow, I'm becoming a boy. But I find there's a pattern in each one of these activities that I'm trying to regain, and I have regained. And it's not about the activities. It's about what they give you. Right. It's about part of you that comes alive when you do that. When I go to swim and I'm not afraid I'm going to drown, it's like, oh, that's so good. I wish I learned that in childhood. But in each one of those instances, I had to be almost embarrassed. I had to approach a man, very often older, but not always, who had something that I didn't have. And I had to say, can you teach me? And men love that. Men love to be useful, don't we? No matter how old, young, they love that. But very few men are humble enough or have suffered enough to do that. And I think what's stopping you from going there and saying, I'm in need. You may be younger than me, but you have something I don't. Can you give it to me? Can you teach me? So if anything is stopping us, if any form of shame is stopping us, there you go. That's the fatherhood shame, because the fatherhood says you should be like them. You should be more than them. You're older. You should be more competent. You should. Yeah, but you're not. So right. What? Don't you want to get it? But if you say, I can never make that soft part vulnerable again, that's the shame. The shame of the fatherhood. You're not like other men. There's something wrong with you. They can never accept you if they feel that you're a failure, if they feel how clumsy you are or something like that, which is absolute lie. People love to stoop down and help someone who is in some form of need, or not so much to feel pity for you, but it's make them feel good, make them feel useful. So it's a win-win when we do that, but shame stops us. Right. I think that's very well stated. And you started to move into the next thing I wanted to talk with you about, which is the what people refer to as the inner child, your younger self. So for example, you said, hey, I'm 40, but I feel like I'm 4, when this challenge comes up. And what you said in your book was, if we want to be healed, we must risk becoming young again. For the wounds we have would not be within our reach if we continue to keep away from the boy who once sustained them. Now, this is a place I can tell you a lot of men don't want to go. For one thing, there's shame. Like, I'm an adult man. I'm 40 years old. Like, I shouldn't, all that stuff is behind me, right? Yeah. I've passed all that. And I don't want to feel like a 4-year-old, even though maybe he does a lot. Yeah. So what are some of the ways, when you're working with clients, do you have some ways that you can help them kind of break through that resistance and actually make contact with their younger selves that are suffering, that, as I always tell clients, have important information that you need? Yes. Yeah. Well, definitely. The most important thing is you need to be in touch with that child. And people say, yeah, but I'm childlike, I'm playful, I'm in touch with him. I don't mean just that. I mean with his pain. Yeah. Because unless you're in touch with that wound emotionally, you can never heal it. Conceptually, maybe you can realize some things. Maybe you can identify some triggers or some coping mechanisms, but that's not good enough. Right. You want to get in that raw emotion. You want to feel that. And the best thing that can happen to you is the worst thing that will happen to you. if you know what I mean. There was a quote from Carl Jung, who was, I think it was Carl Jung, or was it Freud? One of those guys, anyway, who, you know, he would see a patient, and then the patient will come in and say, "Oh, I had a lovely day," and he said, "Oh, well, don't worry, we'll get to it next time." And then the patient will say, "I had a horrible day." I say, "Perfect, come.
Yes.
Now it's time to do the work," because then all those weak, raw, young, immature, undeveloped, shame-filled places are up. And when they're up, they're within our reach. And now we can start drawing out, and now we can start allowing that child to really tell us what he feels.
Right.
Otherwise, it's all here. But it's like, when you feel things, then that's what you need to go with, because that's your current truth. It doesn't mean it's the truth. It's the truth that the result of our condition. So yes, I know it's unpleasant. It's horrible. I don't like it. I want to get up tomorrow morning and have a great day. But if I don't, and something in me responds, I need to pay attention. Okay, what's happening then? What's responding? Why is it so out of proportion? Something needs attention here. So yeah, a good day is a bad day.
Right. Good day is a lost opportunity when we're talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple of the things that I do with clients, because, you know, I work primarily with men, and a lot of them have no sense of, like, who is my 6-year-old? Who is my 12-year-old? They have no sense of, they have intellectual sense, they have memories and stuff. So one of the things I like to do is ask them to share some childhood photos with me. Look at them together, and ask them questions about, who is this boy? You know, what does he think of you as a man? What does he need from you right now? And the other thing I like to do I do with pretty much every client, is I have them draw pictures of different, like, experiences or circumstances in their lives, or how they feel about a person or something like that. And, you know, they almost always say, well, if I do that, it'll look like a 6-year-old did it. And I'm like, that is exactly what we want. That's the guy we want to bring into this conversation. So I think that your point about, as you said, if we want to be healed, we must risk becoming young again. And the way you elaborated on it just now, it's not just about going fun and going to the child's park and going down the slide and all that stuff, which is great. That helps too. But there is in my experience personally and observationally and with clients, it's like, there's so much information that those younger selves have for us. And the 12, 13-year-old, that's another key point where a lot of things go wrong in people's lives, men and women. So along those lines, you talk about agreements in your book, and the importance of agreements. You use an example from the movie Gladiator, I believe, where you talk about agreements. So tell us about the types of agreements we make as little boys that follow us into adulthood and limit our ability to live and develop fully as men. I talked about one earlier, right? Like, I talked about the agreement I had with my father. I would always be angry after work because he was.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll give the credit to a lovely man called John Eldridge, who wrote a book, Wild at Heart, a while ago. And I know it's a Christian spiritual thing, but I was listening to something of his, and he talks about agreement with the lies that come to us. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, that's very interesting, because that's one way of putting it. So an example would be, I can never be a man. Like, literally, to me, that was it. I mean, there were men like my dad, and there were men like other people, but I never felt like a man. Never. And of course, you start believing that early on, then things will manifest, even in your body. Feelings will come that will just reinforce that. Well, you're not really a man. So therefore, there's a vacuum in you, just waiting to be assaulted by all sorts of things. Just anything is welcome to come in. But if you're solidified, if like that little grain, little seed of masculinity, it's really bonded with daddy, and then everything you build on top of that, it's like, okay, you still have wounds, but at least you never question, of course I'm a man, you know. But with me, one example would be, I'm not really a man. And I remember later, you know, guys from the village where I grew up, you know, in Bulgaria, they would say, oh, look at you, George, you and your cats. I mean, that's not a thing for a man, you know. You're grown up to be a man. You need to get a dog. And then I'm thinking, he's right. I don't like dogs. Of course, I'm not really a man. See how he just keeps reinforcing. Then, So that's an example.
I'll give you an example from my history that actually it's also part of my mother wound. When my father would be terrible to me, which was often, I would go to my mother and I would ask her, you know, like, well, why does he act like this? You know, I wanted to feel better. And she would tell me long stories about his childhood and how terrible it was. And she would always tell me, your father is harder on himself than he is on anybody else. And the lesson that I took from that is men are harder on themselves than they are on anybody else. And that was one of the agreements that I made with her about how to be a man. Boy, did I act that one out, you know, for a couple of decades. I feel like I'm pretty free of it now, but you know, that points to the value of becoming conscious, as I did. But like, what is the agreement that I made as a little boy about how to be a man? Like, it matters. You know, people say, "Oh,
absolutely,
that was 10 years ago or whatever," but it matters because that's part of your that's a big part of your operating principle when it comes to how you express masculinity in the world. It's like, what kind of a man can you be if you really believe that you have to be harder on yourself than anybody else, and that's how you're a man.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she intentionally wanted me to believe that, but it's almost like there's a carelessness on her part, not understanding, you know, that I'm trying to figure this out, and she's telling me this is how you do it, you know. So kind of next to last thing that I wanted to explore with you as a topic, and you touched on this in your book as well, grieving. The question being, why is the development of a skillful, confident approach to feeling grief and grieving important? And I did make the distinction between feeling grief and grieving, because to me they are two separate states. Because
I think everyone feels it.
Well, to some extent.
To some extent, but not everyone grieves. That's
right.
For sure.
For me, grieving has always been difficult. So actually, I guess I have my three states are not just feeling miserable and not knowing why, and then feeling that there's grief there, and then actually being able to get into it in an action sort of mode and feel it and express it and let it run through me and let the insights come and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, for other people, those stages might not be so discrete, but it's a difficult process for me. And I've learned that there's an advantage to at least being able to acknowledge that I'm feeling it right now. Even if nothing's coming out, at least I'm feeling it. How does that apply in your view and in your experience with this father wound work?
Hugely, absolutely. And of course, excuse me, of course, it depends what your personality is. So, because we all have defenses, right? Some of us who become hardened on the outside are the fighters. And so they will just attack the world. And the first thing they'll feel if you scratch the surface will be anger. Hey, leave me alone, you know. Someone just crosses them and they're like, oh, you idiot, you know. But me, I became the opposite. And so very often when you work with men, you need them to drop their guards. And so if they're a fighter type, then behind anger, it's always grief. But with me, grief had to come first because I was just helpless, vulnerable young child. I didn't know how to feel anger. The only anger I had was just to myself. And so grief was first. And so honestly, for years, all I did was just grieve. And I grieved because I was getting in touch with that child. I grieved on and off for a long, long time over nothing, over things like even a child won't grieve. Like I one example was, don't know what I was going through. It was like 6-7 years ago. I was already well into this work, and I lost some money, cash. And of course I felt like a failure. I felt everything, boom, boom, look at you, you're an idiot, you know. And I remember going home and I just feeling like a failure, and just looked out of the window. There was a little baby fox in the broad daylight. And I just felt this grief because this baby was vulnerable. It was just out in the daylight, and I just started to really, really cry. And I'm like, part of me is observing, saying, that's not normal. But it's not about normal. Nothing is normal.
Right.
What comes out needs to come out. So, and I grieved some loss. And then that led me, eventually I emptied myself of that grief and saying, I shouldn't even be alive. This world breaks. This world, like Ernest Hemingway said, just breaks everyone, crushes. This young fox will be dead one day. I will be crushed one day. It's like this, I shouldn't even be alive. But that didn't come from the grown-up George who just lost some money. That came from a little child. But I had already, prior to that stage, I had already been doing lots of work to open those channels and to become one with that child and his suffering. And so that grief was just huge. And then But eventually that gave rise to something wonderful. And then almost like a question came to me. In a spiritual sense, it was like, who made you feel like nothing? Who made you feel like you're defenseless, you're nothing? And I had this image of these bullies, and unprotected, alone. My father wasn't around. And then I finally got in touch with, that was deeper than grief, the anger, the actual fighter. See, with, it should have been the other way around. The 12-year-old, the 13-year-old, he's the protector, he's the fighter. He now developed to say no, but to me, he was completely gone, and just that mushy, vulnerable, just grief-filled child. But the fighter was there, but I had to go through the grief. And so, of course, one of the blessings of doing this work for a decade now is like, now I honestly cannot say that I have a day without shedding a tear. And that's sometimes you listen to a song or you just watch something or just beautiful day, and it's like, it's not like I'm grieving it. There's plenty to grieve, but it's just, you're in touch with emotions, you're in touch with what you feel. But that was a result, I can honestly say, that was a result of few processes, and one of them is grieving. Grieving constantly for a long time, getting in touch with grief.
Yeah. It's still tough for me. I've joked with people before. It's like, I grieve as frequently as the United States has a presidential election. Like every 4 years I cry, and it's not good for me. It's not good for me. I am not at the point where you are, where I'm that available, to those kind of feelings. It usually takes something pretty significant for me because there's so many layers of punishment and shaming. And I've talked about this in other videos, I think, where for me, that moment right before I'm about to cry, I feel like I'm going to die. It's just like I feel like a hole is opening up in the earth, and I'm just going to be sucked down into it and never come back. And then once things start to move, it's like, okay, it's okay. It hurts, it's painful, but it's okay. And when I'm at my best and my most functional, I'm somewhere along the lines of what you're talking about, where like I can see something that's just touching, it's not a bad thing. It's just touching, or it touches something in me, and then I can, I tear up a little bit. It's like, that's okay. But that's a work in progress for me. And I've gone into some of the reasons why in other conversations. Okay. So I want to share one other thing before we finish. You did me the honor of including a poem I wrote several years ago as the very first thing in your book, in the very first chapter. And in the spirit of what we're talking about, I'd just like to read that now and share it with everybody. And then we can, if you have anything to say or any reactions or responses afterwards, I'd love to hear them. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Let me get this thing up where I can see it. Actually, I guess I'll share the screen so everybody can see it, huh? Why not? We have the technology. Okay, this is a poem called My Father's Body. I need to be near him. I need to touch him. I need him to touch me. I need him to hold me. I need to be small with him. I need him to be big with me. I need to play with his fingers. I need to rest in his hands. I need to crawl all over him. I need to nip his ears. I need to pull his tail. I need him to catch me when I tumble. I need to sleep on his chest. I need to drift in his scent. I need to fall into his skin. I need to dream on his body. His body feeds me. It makes me safe. It makes me real. It teaches me how to be close. It shows me how to trust. His body makes me whole. His body is my home. His body makes my body. I hunger for it still.
Well, that's just, I would use one word, and that would be holy. That's a holy thing.
Wow.
It doesn't get closer to the bone, spiritually, emotionally, physically. So that's a very holy thing. And as such, I think all of us, and literally, I mean, again, it's a huge claim, but all of us are this. All of us. Those who hate our fathers, those who blindly worship our fathers, those who don't know our fathers, all of us have that poem inside of us. Because that point points at so many things. And so it's just so close to our humanity as men. It's a wonderful poem. That's why I included it, because unless we return to that longing, there's not hope. There's no hope for dealing with the father wound. And even if we hate our fathers, even if he's the worst person in the world, we hate him because of what could have been.
Right.
Not because we're indifferent. We're not indifferent, are we? We have to,
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now we have generation of young, fatherless young men who are, they're just ready to kill and die. They want to destroy the world,
right,
because of that, because of what they didn't have.
Right.
So definitely there's no indifference there, no matter what they say.
And you know what? That's, I've written 3 poetry books. I've put out a lot of very personal, vulnerable stuff. Reading that, even for anybody to see it, it feels so incredibly vulnerable for me. I mean, I have shame about it. I have fear and anxiety about it. What if somebody doesn't understand it? What if they criticize me? What if they call me a big baby? Or worse things that I could imagine if I kept going. But you, including in your book, you gave me a little bit of extra boost.
Good.
Yeah, I think I can do this. I think I can put this out there. I think I can actually read this, in a YouTube video, and I think it'll be okay. So one other thing I want to mention is that at the end of your book, you have a series of questions. You have a section on practical guidance, which I think is great. So if someone's been watching and listening to us and they're like, well, I don't even know how to get started, what do I do? I would say, get George's book, read it. It's, what is it, like 48 pages or something like that?
Oh, it's very small. It's very small.
It's a very easy read in terms of the amount of information. You're not going to want to plow through it like a steamroller, though, because there's some stuff in there that's going to connect if you let it. But it's very manageable in terms of the amount of content and so forth. And I think I've told you this. I'm already recommending this to clients. I have been ever since I read it. And I recommend it to everybody who's been watching this and connecting with some of the things that we're talking about. So if you would, please tell everybody how to find you. How do they find your book and your other writing and podcasts? How do they get in touch with you to find out about coaching? And I will include all the links that you want me to in the description below the video. But at least here at the end of the video, just kind of give people an idea how they get in touch with you. What's the best way to find out more?
Social media, I'm on all the known platforms. My website, my coaching website is trainingformen.co.uk. And I have a blog and podcast and videos, which I've called Men's Corner, and that's menscorner.co.uk again. And the books are on Amazon, both the UK version and the American. So if you type my name, which probably be a bit of a challenge, but they will just come up.
Yeah, we'll get all those links in the description. And let me check my notes. I thought there was one other thing. Oh yeah, you and I are gonna have another conversation soon because there's a second book in this series, and so we'll be talking about that soon, and people can look forward to that. And lastly, I just want to encourage people to like, share, and subscribe. Help my channel, help get the word out, help get people more acquainted with guys like George that are doing this really great work that's really necessary and really valuable and very profound and very accessible at the same time. So I want to thank you, George, for all the work that you do. I want to thank you for including me in your process for the last several years, because I feel like it's a real privilege to watch you develop your content, your work, your approach, and as a man. And thank you for taking some time to talk with me today.
Well, thank you, Rick. I've included you, and I will continue to do so because you've been a part of that process. So yes, keep up your good work, and thank you so much for all your help to me so far. And thank you so much for today. It's flown by, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely, flown by for me too. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching, and we will be back with another video before you know it. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with George. I hope you benefit from it, and I hope you pass it on to others that might benefit as well. I do want to add some contact information for me. If you want to find out some more information about my work, My website is rickbelden.com. If you want to find out about engaging my services as a coach, that website is rickbeldencoaching.com. And those links will be in the description for the video below. I'll also include a link to the poem that I read if anybody would like to have access to that. Thanks. See you next time.